Hi, everyone. Welcome to a Vikings Online Sports Wrap edition. It's Darren, Doogie, Wolfson from the 5 Eyewitness News Sports Department. It's Tom Pelissero, beat reporter for 1500 ESPN.com. Tom's done a wonderful job all year. Vikings fans, you are very lucky to have Tom covering your favorite football team on a daily basis, from breaking the John Sullivan story to so many others. Wonderful work all year, Tom.
Thanks, Doogie. Appreciate it.
Is my check in the mail?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, let's play the who's back and who's not back. Sunday, Mall of America Field. Are we seeing E.J. Henderson play his final game as a Viking?
I'd say there's a pretty decent chance you're seeing E.J. Henderson. I think you can look at a lot of the guys who are in their 30s and contract years. Jim Kleinsasser is going to retire. You might have a couple of guys who aren't going to be out there, too. Steve Hutchinson may have played his last game. Certainly, I think, has probably played his last game for the Vikings, although it still remains to be seen exactly how that plays out. But guys like Visante Shanko, you got to remember, this team's going to get younger before they get better. All those guys who are in their 30s and contracts are up, even some guys that aren't, but are due a lot of money, they might not be around.
Anthony Herrera, back or not?
I would guess not, because I think they have a couple other options. They've got Joe Berger. They've got Brandon Fusco, who they think highly of. Had a personal foul in the game in one of his 12 snaps the other day, but has shown some positive traits. I think you can go young at those guard spots. I wouldn't be surprised if both starting guards get turned over next year.
Coaching changes. Fred Puggich, defensive coordinator, back or not?
I would say no at this point. I've heard for a couple of months now that he's probably not going to be around now. Would they like to have him around as linebackers coach? Probably, because he's an excellent linebackers coach, but has been overmatched as a defensive coordinator. There were a lot of turmoil with that entire unit throughout this season. No, I think they go a different direction there. The real question is not whether they change coordinators. I think that's done. It's how drastically do they change their scheme, too.
If they do change their scheme, it would be in a drastic way to a 3-4 look. Jared Allen was pretty open in the locker room on Wednesday afternoon, saying they better come to me at least. If they're thinking about a change like that, they better approach me. He made it sound like he's got no interest in a 3-4 look.
Well, and that's not surprising. I don't think that any accomplished 4-3 end is going to be particularly eager to go and play in a 3-4, and you're right. That would be the number one decision they would have to make, and the first conversation they would have would be with Jared Allen. That's why when I heard that one of the considerations was having Mike Singletary be a guy running a 3-4 defense for these Vikings, I shuddered about that, because you're not going to be able to have a guy who's never coordinated an NFL defense talk some of these guys into what they're going to do. If you get someone who has run it and had success with it and bring him in, he might be able to show Jared Allen, listen, I've worked with this player and this player and this player. They've made this transition. You can do this. You can be great at this. This might actually prolong your career, because you won't be in a headbutt situation every single snap like you are being a 4-3 defensive end. But if you've got somebody who hasn't done it before, that's going to be a really tough sell. I don't think they're that far away if Jared will be willing to do it. If he's not willing to do it, that's certainly a consideration.
Let's talk about the quarterback position. Christian Ponder has passed all of his concussion tests, so presumably he'll be on the field on Sunday. On Joe Webb, I'm semi-intrigued by Webb, but give a defense a week to prepare for Webb, and I'm not quite sure he does what he's done against, say, the Lions and the Redskins.
Well, go back to the season finale last year against Detroit. Joe Webb didn't play very well in that game. He brings some unique athletic traits to the table, but the question is it sustainable what you're doing? Because you can't plug Joe Webb into the offense that they otherwise want to run and what they're trying to run with Christian Ponder. He's a one-read and go guy. That's what he's going to be. Volume is a concern with Joe Webb at this point. Could he do it? I'm not saying he can't. It's just you would probably want to gear it more toward his skills, which is a lot of spread option stuff, that blazer package type of things that they run. He only threw 2 drop back passes in that game the other day. For as well as he played against Washington, he dropped back and threw 2 passes. They were great passes, but they were one-read plays. He has those physical traits that really seem to intrigue you, but in terms of the overall package, by no means the Vikings giving up on Christian Ponder.
This has been talk radio fodder here in town for years, going back to our old place. I mean, we're talking 10, 11, 12 years. But finally, might we see the Vikings hire a general manager?
It's possible. I know there's been conversations about that for over a month within the Vikings organization, and that's sort of one of those things, though, that happens every year, which is they're constantly evaluating the process. I think if you look at this, this is the year to do it, if you were ever going to do it, because it's one thing to not have a general manager and not have that one person dictating his vision when your team is good. When you are rebuilding, you need one person to say, this is what we're doing. You read comments from Leslie Frazier like, we just need to plug in a few pieces and we're going to be good. No, it's more than that. You cannot continue to take a Band-Aid approach to the Vikings personnel situation. They need to get a lot younger. They need to be one of the youngest teams in the NFL next season. You've got to move on from some of the older players. You've got to develop younger players. You've got to amass draft picks, not give up draft picks. A 6th-round pick for Donovan McNabb, a 3rd-round pick for Randy Moss. That has to stop. You need to get more draft picks. You need to get an influx of young players and young talent. Yeah, they could be more competitive. I would certainly expect the Vikings to win more than 3 or 4 games next season, but that's just because it's tough to be that bad for that long in the NFL. But at the same time, you need one person to be able to take them out of this constant and back and forth who wins what argument situation. That's all it is right now.
Let's keep going with the hypothetical. They bring in a general manager. Let's say it's A.J. Smith. A.J. Smith gets fired in San Diego. He comes in. Or Bill Parcells. You name whoever you would like to name. Would that guy then have final say on Leslie Frazier, or would the new GM have to come in with the understanding that no matter what, Leslie Frazier gets a second year?
I don't think that, well, I think that Leslie Frazier gets a second year, but I don't think that anybody in their right mind would take a job being told you have to keep Leslie Frazier as your coach. I think that you would want to have control over it. Now, there's not a lot of general managers who are going to make that move immediately. Some will, but go back to, say, Green Bay when Ted Thompson took over in 2005. He kept Mike Sherman around after Sherman had actually been stripped of GM duties, and then subsequently gave Mike Sherman a contract extension only to fire him a month later and hire Mike McCarthy, which ended up being a fantastic move. You have to look at this from a variety of different angles. I think the more likely situation, if they were going to go to a GM, would be that you promote Rick Spielman. You give him the power to have the power over the roster. Maybe he fails miserably. It's entirely possible. I think even Rick Spielman would say it's entirely possible that he would fail, but at least it would be his vision and not this amalgamation of different voices in the room and not having a clear line, this is where we're going.
The Vikings finish with a win on Sunday. How costly would that win be in terms of draft position? I haven't done the homework. Could they fall as low as 6, 7? They already screwed themselves. I get it from a player and coach standpoint. Those guys, it's their livelihood. So I get it. They had to play to win against Washington, but from a fan standpoint, what they did against the Redskins was incredibly costly. Now if they beat the Bears, and the Bears stink, so the Vikings absolutely can win this game, how badly could they screw themselves in terms of draft position?
I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe 6 is the lowest that they can go. Now remember, go back to that game against Philadelphia last year and how costly that was in terms of draft position. I believe if they had lost that game last December 20th or whatever it was, they would have actually been 7th instead of 12th in the draft. Then maybe you've got your pick. Then maybe Jake Locker is the quarterback of the future.
Maybe Jake Locker would have been here.
A lot of different things happen in the course of a draft. I think Locker probably would have been, he absolutely would have been the guy over Christian Ponder, even though I know there was a lot of debate behind the scenes about those two guys versus one another. They liked Locker a lot. When you look at it in that perspective, 5 spots can be a big difference. 5 spots can be a trade that you make and pick up another high draft pick. Again, I think that what they're going to look to do going into this draft is trade down from that top spot. If they end up with a shot at Ryan Khalil, if they manage to get him in and have your left tackle of the future, you go and you get that guy without question. But if you don't have that chance and you're looking at, do you take a receiver in the top 5? Do you look at another position? I think that their first instinct will be trade down, get more picks, replace the picks that you've been losing for years, and build the thing from the ground up.
Not that you normally don't dress nicely, but why on a Wednesday afternoon are you wearing a tie?
I had to present the Corey Stringer Good Guy Award to Percy Harvin today.
Percy Harvin. He was actually pretty accessible all season long.
He's a guy who, now let's not forget, Percy Harvin's gone through a lot over the past couple of years. Everything that he went through with the migraines over the past couple of years, he lost his grandmother, he was away from the team, he bounced in and out. We saw a different Percy Harvin this entire season. We really did. And with the media, it's not just an award for who's the nicest with the media. The media is the extension of the fans. And people want to hear from players. In order to do that, you got to have guys who are going to be available and also accountable. And I respect anybody who's going to step forward and be a leader, say when things are wrong, call a spade a spade. Percy Harvin did that week in and week out. He would give you a minute of your time, even if he'd already talked that day. He's a guy who really took a step forward, and that's part of being a professional. And so I think we appreciate that.
Excellent work by Tom Pelissero. For Tom Pelissero, I'm Darren Doogie Wolfson. Have a happy and healthy new year.